Chico from Chico Study Corner, and today I will be dealing with the part 2 of sexual reproduction in flowering plants. That is the class 12 biology chapter 2 of CBSE. So, if you haven't watched the part 1 of this chapter, please go watch it and then continue watching. And I will be uploading notes in my description. Please go download it and read it for better understanding. So, without any further ado, let's get into the chapter. So, now the first thing we have to learn is megasporogenesis. We learned what is megaspores. So, next is megasporogenesis, the formation of megaspores. What is megaspore? Megaspore is the female structure in a plant. Okay? So, let's see. So, megasporogenesis. Actually, the word megasporogenesis has the word megaspore, so that is easier to connect to as the formation of megaspore. And microsporogenesis is the formation of microspore. And then the next point we have to learn under it is every ovary. Where do we find these megaspores, or where do we find these ovules? It is inside an ovary. Okay. So when I do ovary, I always do it like this, isn't it? So over here, how many ovules did I mark? Over here I marked 6 ovules. So it means an ovary can have 1 or more ovules. Okay? And then actually megasporogenesis is monosporic. Because one ovule will only produce one spore. Okay? So that is monosporic. So let's see. So when we learned about the structure of the ovule, we learned the chalacil ends, the micropylar end, we learned about the nucellus, etc. So in the nucellus, there's only one cell that is very close to the micropylar end. Okay, the one that is close to the micropylar end, that would be the megaspore mother cell. Okay, in the previous case, instead of nucellus, what did we have for the microsporogenesis? We had over there what? Sporogenous tissues, and all of the single tissues acted as a mother cell, microspore mother cell. But in the case of megasporogenesis, only one nucellus acts as megaspore mother cell. Okay, so let's see. So I'm just drawing a rough figure. So this is the micropylar end, chalacil end. So over here only one out of I drew the structure of nucleus to be like honeycomb, no? This structure. So only one out of it would undergo the process of meiosis, and after undergoing the process of meiosis, this will form 4 of them, 4 cells, out of which 3 of them will degenerate, and this one would again then continue its process. Okay, so over here we said these 3 degenerate and there's only one, and still there is no gamete formation happened. So let's see how is the gamete formed. So next is the gamete formation of megaspores. Out of the 4, the 3 of them will degenerate, and the one left is over here. This will undergo mitosis and will split into 2. And again this will undergo mitosis and will become 4. Okay? Again this will undergo mitosis and will become 8. Again it will undergo mitosis, and over here what is happening? There is we have cytokinesis happening over here. So now what happens? this is what over here, all over here what happened was karyokinesis only, and over here there was cytokinesis. Okay, so over here the formation of the female gamete is formed. Okay, so now this is ready for sexual reproduction. So now let's see the structure of the female gametophyte. Okay, we drew 3 cells over here. There was 2 nuclei, and then again there was 3 cells on this side. Okay, so these 2 are the synergids. Okay, these synergids have something known as the filiform apparatus. That is a thickening on the synergids. This filiform apparatus helps in what? Guiding the energy possessed by the synergids. And this is called as the egg cell. Okay? Egg cell. And these two nuclei over here, they are known as the polar nuclei. Okay? Everything has a nucleus over here. I just didn't mention. This is known as, these two together is known as, this is not a cell actually. If I draw like this, you'll misunderstand. So let's make it. These two together is called as the polar nuclei. I'll tell you why it is known as the polar nuclei. So this is the polar nuclei, and this over here, it is a, there are 3 of them, okay? There are antipodal cells, okay? And now we can see there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this is the 7th cell. And the 7th cell is known as the what? Central cell. Okay? So we say that the female gametes in most of the angiosperms are given out, or are shown out in this stage. This is known as the 7th cell 8 nucleated stage. See, this is 7th cell, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the number of nuclei 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that is 7th cell and 8 nucleates like stage. Okay. And now we discussed about it. Now let's see this same structure. How is it placed? Is this portion coming in the chalaza length, or this portion is coming in the chalaza length? We'll see. So when we do the ovule, we do the chalaza length and the micropylar end. So before telling that, I forgot to mention something. The synergids plus the egg cell, they contribute the egg apparatus. Okay, these together are called as the egg apparatus. Over here I drew 3 of them, no, like this. This all together is known as the egg apparatus. Okay, so next we'll draw the this same structure inside the ovule. So let's see. So this is the integments of the, this is the outer one and the inner one. Over here this is the hilum. This is the funicle. and over here this is the chalazolant. This is microphyllum. Okay, so over here, what is happening? The egg apparatus would come on this side. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. We draw. This is the synergids and this is the egg apparatus. Over here this is the polar nuclei and this is the 3 antipodal cells. Okay, and I told you the structure of this thing is nucleus is drawn like this. So this goes like this. It's completely filled. Nucleus is completely over the this female female gamete. Okay, so this is the structure that comes inside the ovule. The structure will look like this. Okay, so next I'll tell you why does the name polar nuclei come. Because when we were doing the cell differentiation, there was, 8 nucleus. Okay, these 8 nucleus first moved to the poles, and from there it came to the central cell. So that is why it is known as the polar nuclei. Now let's learn about pollination. So pollination, we learned in the previous one. What is pollination? Pollination is the transfer of gametes. Okay, so the transfer of gametes is known as pollination for plants. For animals, we learned the transfer of gametes is copulation. So for over here, we learned something, that pollination is gamete transfer. This transfer or germination of these pollen grains would happen only if the pollen and the stigma are compatible. How do you say it is compatible? When the chemical interactions between the pollen grains and the stigma is compatible, then you say there would be germination of the pollen grains. Like if that is the reason why other plants, other species cannot germinate on another species. There is a different, every pollens cannot germinate on every stigma. There is a particular stigma for a particular pollen. It has to go there to have the special chemical reactions to take place. So that is to talk about pollination. So pollination is of 2 types. That is, one is self-pollination and the other one is what? Cross-pollination. So self-pollination is known as, self-pollination has 2 types. That is autogamy and geitonogamy. And cross-pollination is known as xenogamy. Okay, so now let's learn about autogamy in detail. So what is autogamy? Autogamy is a mode of pollination where let's take this as our stigma. This is our anther. So this is our anther. If this, and this is the same flower, okay, this happens in the same flower. If this anther or the pollen grains from the same flower fall on the stigma, then and this germinates. So this type of pollination is known as autogamy. Autogamy can take place both in what? Both in Chasmogamous and Cleistogamous flowers. Okay. So over here, Chasmogamous can have any of them. It can have the autogamy, the geitonogamy, the xenogamy, anything. But for Cleistogamous flowers, only autogamy is possible. So there are some conditions for autogamy. The first condition is that the stigma and the anther should lie almost close to each other. It shouldn't be too far away. And also this autogamy is in the same flower. That can only happen in a bisexual flower. Okay. Unisexual flowers cannot do autogamy. Only bisexual flowers do autogamy. So we learned about Chasmogamous flowers also can do autogamy, geitonogamy and xenogamy, whereas Cleistogamous flowers can only undergo autogamy. What is Cleistogamous flowers? The closed flowers, they do not open, so they don't have any exposure to anyone else. So the self-pollination only happens. That's a autogamy from the same thing. And over here, the requirement for a pollinator or a carrier is not needed. It can happen by its own because it's in a single plant. Okay. And the next one is geitonogamy. Let's see what is geitonogamy. So, this is also what you call, and in the previous case in autogamy there is no variations. And over here for geitonogamy, this is like from the same plant. Okay, this is a flower. This is its stigma, anther. There is another flower. This is its stigma. This is its anther. This is stigma. This is its anther. So if this falls on this, it's from the same flower. If the anther falls or the pollen grains from another flower in the same plant falls on this, then what would happen? This process is known as geitonogamy. So then for geitonogamy also there is a requirement for the pollinators because it is close but it's still apart. So pollination requires what? Pollinators. So that is a requirement. And then the next point until this is over here also no variation takes place because it's from the same plant. So no variation in the progeny. So now we learn about cynogamy. So let's learn. Cynogamy. What is it? Cynogamy is a method of pollination, that is cross pollination. So cross pollination is also called as cynogamy, and the cynogamy happens from a different plant. Okay, it's not in the same plant; it's in a different plant. But like all the a mango tree, the pollens of a mango tree cannot be germinated on a coconut tree. I told you there is particular reactions. It should be compatible. These from the same species from a different plant. I'll show you. So let's see. This is the stigma. This is the anther. Over here also there is flowers. Okay. Anther. Over here also there is this is another plant. This is a stigma. This is the anther. So over here, if this comes and fall in this, or let's say we can have a flower over here also, no? Stigma, anther. So if this pollen grain comes and falls on this, or this comes and falls on this is known as what? Cross pollination. It's not on the same plant. It's a type of cross breeding or cross pollination. So this is cross pollination, and over here there is variations. Because there is difference between individual plants. There is some genetic difference between each individual plants. So one can be tall, one can be dwarf, one can be having round seeds, one can be having shrunken seeds, or this can have a high yielding capacity where it's disease resistant. When you cross pollinate it, you will get a seed or a progeny with both the characters. Okay, so this is so implies what there is variations, and there is a must. It's 100% must for pollinators or agents for pollination. And this is the whole to talk about the 3 types of pollinations. So now we have to learn about the 2 cleistogamous and chasmogamous flowers. So let's write chasmogamous, cleistogamous. So over here this is what exposure is there. Over here exposure is not there. And let's draw a chasmogamous flower. This is the stigma, this is the anther, and let's take another color. So this is like rough sketch of chasmogamous flower. And for the cleistogamous flower, this is the cleistogamous flower. It looks like a bud, but it's not a bud. It doesn't open. That is it. Okay. So this is there is exposure, and there's no exposure. That is the main difference between like Chasmogamous and Cleistogamous flowers. For Chasmogamous flowers, all types of pollinations, that is the autogamy, the gatenogamy and the coenogamy can take place, but for Cleistogamy only autogamy will take place. Okay, and the next point of difference, or the next point that separates it is blooming flowers. Okay, it blooms, whereas this is not blooming flowers. Okay, so that is all to talk about both the Chasmogamous and Cleistogamous flowers. So next we will be learning about outbreeding devices. So let's see. So outbreeding, before discussing about outbreeding, why don't we discuss what is inbreeding, so that would be more easier for better understanding about outbreeding methods. So inbreeding, the word in, that is self-pollination or self-breeding, is what is meant by inbreeding. So if there is a lot of inbreeding taking place, if there's continuous inbreeding taking place, that's continuous autogamy or continuous gatenogamy taking place, the fertility of the plant or the fertility of that whole flower plant would be destroyed, hence resulting in the destruction of the fertility is known as inbreeding depression. So if inbreeding is like self-breeding, so what is outbreeding? Outbreeding is that helping of cross-pollination or crossbreeding. So let us see. So I told you I'm going to discuss about outbreeding methods. So how do you encourage outbreeding? Okay, if you're doing the same inbreeding itself, then that would be only the same progeny. There won't be any betterment or any variations happening. So for outbreeding, we have some methods. So let's discuss that. So the first one is production of unisexual flowers. But this won't completely not allow self-breeding. It allows gatenogamy. It does not allow only autogamy to take place. So the second one is that the position of both the stigma and the anther is different, so that the pollen grains cannot fall on the stigma. So that is the second point. There is a difference between the distance, or it is not close. Okay, and the third one is self incompatibility. What do you mean by self incompatibility? I told you the flowers to the pollens to germinate, there should be compatibility. If if it is on the same flower, if they reject the pollen, what would happen? Then there won't be germination of the pollen grains. Last point is the plants will not have a synchrony between the maturation of the stigma and the maturation of the maturation of the stigma, the maturation of the ovule and the maturation of the pollen grain would be in different timing. So that if that pollen grain falls also, there won't be sexual reproduction in flowers taking place. So this is the outbreeding devices. Now we learned about pollination, and now I told you in some cases we need pollinators or agents for pollination. So let's see what all are the agents. We have three agents to learn. It is wind, water and insects. So let's learn about all of them now. So now we'll be discussing about the wind pollinators. So first we'll discuss about the plant. The flower of that plant would be small, it would be colorless, odorless, nectarless. Okay, so the flowers are small, colorless, odorless and nectarless. And also the flowers are arranged in inflorescence, are arranged in a bunch. It's not single flowers, it's arranged in inflorescence. Then to talk about the stamen and the stigma. The stamen is well exposed. Okay, so I'll show you. This is the stamen and this is the stigma and this is the flower. Okay, the flower is small, so and then I just showed it this big as because it should be well exposed. And the stamens are well exposed. The winds can blow the stamens, it's not the stamens, sorry, the pollen grains away. And the stigma is feathery. Why is the stigma feathery? So if the wind is moving and if there is particles, these particles can get stuck over here with the help of the feathery structures on the stigma. And this pollen grains, if it has to move away, it shouldn't be sticky. It should be non-sticky and it should be lightweight. So the pollen grains are non-sticky and light. Okay, light in the sense lightweight. And the ovary contains only one ovule. Okay, so the ovary contains only one ovule. That is to talk about wind pollinators, and the examples are maize, coconut, then what else, grass, etc. So now we'll learn about the water pollinators. So the example is Vallisneria and Hydrilla. So the plant is ribbon-like, dioecious, and it's fully submerged underwater. So Vallisneria is an example for this kind of plant. And also the pollen grains or the pollens are ribbon shaped in the case of Vallisneria, and it has mucilage. What is a mucilage? Mucilage is a coating which prevents the pollen from getting wet. So the mucilage coating is important for the pollen grains. And then not all aquatic plants does their pollination by the method of water pollinations or with the help of water pollinators. It can be wind pollination or insect pollination too. And then the main point is the male gametes, usually the transfer of male gametes is usually in water for lower organisms like algae, bryophytes and pteridophytes. So that is all to talk about the water pollinators. So the last topic for today's lesson or today's session is that is the insect pollinators. Let's see that now. So the first point we have to discuss is about the flower. The flower is colorful and it has nectar. Also it can be in inflorescence or as separate single flowers. So it can be either of them. And then the pollen grains are sticky because the pollinators would come and feed on the flower, and then on the body of the pollinators these pollens should stick. So that's why the pollen is sticky. And these flowers are large and it has good fragrance. Fragrance means a smell, a good smell. And usually the pollinators are attracted by the color or the smell. The pollinators come by the color or the smell. So the examples of some pollinators are bees, butterflies, wasps, birds, etc. Also these primates like reptiles also play a role in pollinating. So bee is the dominant one. Okay, dominant one. Okay, so bee is the dominant one. Whereas if it is a beetle or a fly that is feeding on the flower, or the fly that comes to the flower for pollination, then that flower should have, or it doesn't produce fragrance, instead it produces a foul smell. Okay, and then when you do something, okay, you are asked to do something, and if you do that, what will you get? You will get a reward or you get a prize. So what is a prize for these pollinators? So the pollination rewards are what? The pollens and nectar. Okay. In some cases, why is this called rewards? These bees or some of these organisms consume pollens. We discussed before in the last chapter. We discussed that pollens are consumed by human beings, athletes, also many of the animals too. So pollen grains are one, and the second one is nectar. So they are the rewards. In some cases, there are some naughty pollinators who take the nectar and does not help in pollination. They are known as pollen robbers or nectar robbers. Okay, what do? They take the nectar or they take the pollen without doing pollination. So they are known as pollen robbers or nectar robbers. So now we've come to the end end of our discussion of this session. So I hope you might have liked it. If you have liked it, please do hit that like button and also subscribe to my channel if you're new to it and share my videos with your other friends. So see you on my next video. Till then, bye bye.